Hi, we're the Shiflett Brothers. I'm Brandon.
And I'm Jared.
And we're here at the Gnomon Workshop in LA. And we're thrilled to bring you this DVD where we show you how to create a comic book industry style sculpture. We're going to start with the armature, we're going to block out the form, and we're going to add some detail. Again, we're so happy to do this. Thank you all. Hope you learned something.
Thanks.
Okay, here we are. I'm Brandon.
And I'm Jared again.
And we're really, really happy that Alex Alvarez and the Gnomon Workshop asked us to do this, that they're showing some love to traditional sculptors. These guys who use the programs, who use ZBrush, are just so badass at what they do, and we've seen so many amazing things. But hopefully there's still a place for guys like us who use clay, and we're just really happy that they've reached out to us and had us do this. We're thrilled to be a part of it. As you can see, we're getting started here. This is basically how we get started at home. We don't do any sketches. A lot of good sculptors do. They lay it all out. They maybe even turnarounds, multiple drawings of poses and angles. We just really just start cranking the armature, and we make it up as we go along, pretty much from the beginning all the way through to the end. We're not we're maybe not the most professional style sculptors, but we have our own way, and you know, we're going to show you guys how we do it here. You know, it's not necessarily the right way, but it's the way we do it in Texas. And as you see Jared getting started here with, we use an aluminum alloy armature.
Almalloy. And we bind it with floral wire. And what's great about floral wire is the small white wire you'll see in a second. It has a small weave of thread around it, so that when you hit it with super glue, it creates a strong yet flexible little, almost like a cocoon, so that we can still move the pose a little bit, but it's really secure.
And the aluminum alloy armature, later in the process, if you're going to cut through the sculpture for mold making purposes, etc., this wire is pretty easy to cut through, much more easy than, say, copper wire, which we used in the beginning, early on in our careers. And you get to a point that's very difficult to cut through. This stuff is very flexible. It's strong. It stays in its pose, and pretty easy to cut through if you need to later on. As you can see, Jared's making a circle on the base, and the two legs come up from that. And now he's forming the arms, the shoulder area. And he's added a little neck piece for a head armature. It's very much like a human skeleton. The clay we like to use, Super Sculpey, which we'll talk about later. You know, this stuff won't stand on its own, obviously. And the strength of these armatures is really important, because if it's not strong, if there's give, if there's too much flex in these, then you get cracking problems later on in the process. Your clay will crack because it's not supported correctly. So we like to build these things, and we just use tons of super glue. You know, we just go at it with super glue liberally once we get this floral wire twisted onto it. And the floral wire not only binds the aluminum wire together, then it points, we will wrap the floral wire completely down the arms and legs, etc., because it helps the Super Sculpey grip to the aluminum wire. The clay will spin around on just an aluminum wire, and you'll never have it keep its position. So spiraling the floral wire down the limbs gives the clay something to grasp onto.
Definitely, and it's good to go down one way and then go down the opposing way, so that you create these little X's you'll see in a second, because if you don't, it might unwind or unravel in the future as you're working on it, later in the project. So you can see the little X's created there by going opposing ways. And once you hit that with super glue, man, it's there forever. It's not going to move. And it's going to keep the almaloy together. Like Brandon said, it's going to give the Sculpey something to stick to. And even a third thing, it's very slowly starting to bulk up the piece. And at some point, I'll even grab 2 floral wires at a time around the chest and abdomen so that it's slowly starting to build up stomach and torso region. And it's amazing how fast my hands do move. This is not sped up at all. This is just the natural state of things.
Yeah. Ask the people who've hired us in the past how fast he works. See what they say about that. But you can see, we also, on the, like, for instance, the legs, we like to, give yourself more room than you think you need. It's so much easier to cut off the legs if they're too long to trim into them than it is to add armature if your legs are too short. So on the arms as well, Jared, right? I mean, we like to, on the armature stage of the project, we try to keep them longer, and then you trim them back. And sometimes I'll cut like half an inch off my arm, and then I'll cut another half inch off my arm, and then I'll cut it, and I'm really getting it to the perfect length, because as I say, it's much easier to cut off than it is to add on length to an armature.
It's way better to leave it long and reduce the size as you go, as you figure out, okay, here's where the hands are definitely going to be. And one thing you can see is right there in the crotch, I've bent the legs at the hips. You don't want to go up into just a V formation. You don't want the legs to just go up into a V and meet at the torso, because you want to have plenty of room in the crotch. You don't want to have armature troubles there later.
Yeah, and you're right. And I see kids do that where they come up to a V. But that's not how the pelvis works.
Right.
So what we have there is more of a shape of how the pelvis, how the legs actually come out of the skeleton.
Definitely. Just like you're saying, the legs are, 10 inches, 12 inches apart, at least on most people. So to have it just go up and meet in a V-type formation, you're just not going to have enough room in there. And here comes the super glue. Plenty of super glue. And once it hits that, if you were just to super glue wires together, they might stick for a second. But with the floral wire and the thread on the floral wire, when you super glue it, man, it's not going anywhere. It's really going to be there. It's not going to come apart. And we might be repeating ourselves, but that's really important, because it's really important for the armature to stay stable. And here's some of the first Bondo or plumber's putty that we're breaking out.
Right. This is a 2-part plumber's putty. It's usually two different colors of gray, one on the inside, one on the outside. It comes in a tube or a little roll, like a Tootsie Roll. You mix it up. It gets really hot, and it gets really hard within 5 or 10 minutes. And you basically want to use gloves with this stuff. It's got some toxicity to it.
A little bit, yeah.
And we use this stuff a lot on the interior of the sculpt, whether it's it will bond the armature together where it's never moving. And as right here, Jared's affixing the armature to this wooden craft base, just because sculpts can get top heavy. You don't want them to flip over and ruin a lot of work, which happens. But in this wooden base, you can knock this off later. You can cut it off. But right here, this is a good thing for stabilizing the armature, and you have a base to work with here.
I was going to say you could nail that down just as well, but that's a good example of all of this you could do a million different ways. Even Brandon and I do it a little bit differently.
That's exactly right.
The no way is necessarily right or wrong. it's really, we're self-taught, and it's really just repetition, making mistakes and learning from mistakes, and asking yourself to improve and just staying at it. But
repetition is key. Here you can see the Super Sculpey on the table, but Jared's starting to. Yeah, Jared is laying on the aluminum foil now. That bulks up the middle of the sculpt. You don't want to get Super Sculpey too thick, with weight issues later on in the piece. Again, you're going to have cracking problems because of the sheer weight of the clay pulling down. The foil is much, much lighter on the interior, and not only it'll save you a little money because it's so much cheaper than clay, but even more importantly for us, you're avoiding cracking and stress problems later on in the project.
Right. If it was Sculpey all the way through, it would be about 2.5 inches of Sculpey, and that's just way too much, because when you go to bake it, what you're doing is you're heating the moisture out of it. So you want to get all the moisture. You want to just have the Sculpey about no more than 1/2 inch thick anywhere, because you don't want the like Brandon said, the stress and the weight of it. Any piece can crack, but you can just try to do little things to avoid it. So it happens to everybody. It happens to us. If something cracks, you can repair it maybe with a lot of different things, super glue or Bondo or even Super Sculpey. And that's another good thing about the Bondo, is that it will sand completely flush with the Super Sculpey or most polymer clays.
Yeah, on the cracking, what we're saying is it's going to happen sometimes. It happens to the best of them. But there are just a lot of things you can do that are sort of preventative maintenance, where
exactly,
where you're taking action against it happening in the future.
Now, when we're starting to put on the clay, these are going to be some of the biggest pieces we put on. As we go along, the pieces will get smaller and smaller. For us, it's really an additive process. For I think a lot of what you might think of as classical sculptors of the past, of course, we know they were carving out of limestone or marble or whatever they could get their hands on. But for us, we're adding one piece on top of another. And so when you see the final pectoral muscle or shoulder in the end, it might be 20 layers deep of very, very small pieces put one on top of the other.
Right, and even guys today in our profession do it a little bit differently than us. We're sort of using the pushing method. We're building up, and the other method some people call it raking. And a lot of the good Hollywood FX sculptors use more of a raking method, where you put on a little more clay and you're raking that clay away. You're taking a loop tool and raking out the wrinkles and the indentions. And guys who are a lot of sculptors are absolutely badass using this. Whether it's Jordu Shell or a lot of these Hollywood guys. But we just don't work that way. We start with a wire, and it just builds up slowly.
Maybe we should have been working that way.
Work that way.
The Bondo right there, excuse me, Brandon. The Bondo right there, I'm just building up into a little skull, a skull type formation for the head. Try to leave good deep holes for the eye sockets, because you don't want your eyes to be too flat. That's a common mistake. We did it for years. We still do it sometimes. And that's why you want to really dig in those eye sockets.
You can start seeing the basic shape.
Yeah, I like the shoulders to be real low. I could raise him up, but I like the shoulders to be low. It conveys confidence, and he's not trying to prove anything.
Yeah, and you know what we're going for? I mean, what we're going for here is a barbarian. We're going to show a little anatomy.
This is just the general barbarian you might see in a comic book store. Now, some of the times when I'm putting on two pieces at the same time, one thing is just to speed things up, but it's also just to get some general symmetry going.
We like to, I think both of us like to work out a face pretty early on. And I'm not talking about a finished product, but rough in a face. Because Jared and I feel a lot of times the piece sort of radiates out from the face, you know. So you kind of want to see where it's going to be, what's going on with the face, and then everything else flows from there. Like I said, it's not going to be a finished deal. But you know where the eyes are, you know where the mouth is. And it also, you know, then you understand your scale. For instance, you know, the length of your arms and legs, the size of your hands, everything starts working from there.
And it's really important where the head is on the shoulders. Say if the head is coming straight up, the character seems a little more noble. Say like a Superman or a Captain America, he's got his neck straight up. But then if the head comes down a little bit, the spine starts to curve. It's more carnal. It's more like an animal, like a wolf. Maybe more like Wolverine or Batman would have his head lower. So that tells you something about the body language.
And Jared knows his Wolverine. I bet he sculpted 100 Wolverines in our careers. Most just personal projects, still sitting around our studio and our houses.
Yeah, that's just the age we are. The first comics I ever bought was X-Men 172 and Thor 337.
You're a Wolverine geek.
I'm a Wolverine geek.
You're also a Colossus geek.
I'm a Colossus, Juggernaut. All those guys are my favorite guys. Sabretooth.
And we've been really lucky when people like Randy Bowen have called us with Marvel projects. A lot of times we've gotten those characters, and he's asked us to work on those characters. So it's been a fanboy fest from the beginning. And you see Jared working here on the brow, and the tool we're using is a burnisher, and it's not technically for sculpting. We found this tool and we just love it. We probably use it on 90% of the time we're working the clay. We're using this tool. I think it's for print making, or maybe from some leather.
I think it's from the leather world. Yeah.
And so it has a good weight to it. And one end is completely pointed, and the other end is a point, but with a spoon type shape, and that's the end we like to use.
But it's really whatever you get used to. Again, somebody like Jordu raking all the time. If that's what you get in, you get used to whatever tool you use. So if you have a ball tool or a rake or a spoon or just a spike, maybe a lot of people use toothpicks or something like that.
But it's crucial to find something you're comfortable with.
Exactly.
So talk about the face a little bit right here, Jared. His cheekbones.
Well, I always say you can never have enough cheekbone and you can never have enough jaw muscle. I will keep adding to those. His face will get wider. And
on a barbarian.
On a barbarian, right. So I'm keeping the brow pretty neutral. It's all fairly neutral, but I don't want to go too high or too low with the brow. We'll decide a lot of that later.
You're also, I think you're pretty well known for a lot of your guys like this have noses that look like they've been broken a few times in the past.
That's what I like. That I like the.
Maybe they've been in a fight or two.
They've been in several fights, and I will straight up do the cauliflower ears that like the wrestlers have, and I like to do things that are familiar flaws. I might want to say, doesn't that sound good?
That's right.
And like the little, like giving him not a double chin, but just a little chub under the chin, a little meat underneath there, maybe a receding hairline, a little belly, you know, these things that are familiar to us that make him look more real.
It's like, you know, we talk about the face it's not always as symmetrical as people think. You know, a lot of times one eye is higher or lower on a human face, and sometimes you sculpt that. People may not even know it when they look at it, but on some level, they're like, yeah, that looks right. The eyes are a little offset. They're a little asymmetrical.
And that's so much easier with guys and with monsters, you know. Symmetry is the main component of beauty. So with females, it's so important to get all that real symmetrical and not perfectly symmetrical, but the more the better. But with a guy, you know, you can have little scars, or you can have him just a little more beat up, and it goes all right.
Another difference in sculpting females, which I want to talk on to point out. When we're working on this armature and we're wrapping these arms and legs, you have to be much more careful because just the sheer scale, a woman's wrists and ankles are so much thinner. And so I don't use as much floral wire in those areas, in the wrist and ankle and the hips and all of that. You just want to watch the scale. Obviously, sometimes I don't use aluminum foil in the middle of a girl sculpt at all because she's going to be so thin, and the wire and the floral wire really take up enough space for me.
Oh, I'm so glad I put something on the back of his head, because
that was a problem.
He needs to build up his cranium. He looks a little funny here. And it's good to just get that straight line going down the middle of the pecs and the middle of the abdomen. I don't want to make those ab muscles too symmetrical, because they're really not. If you look at bodybuilders, they'll be kind of off-centered to the left and to the right. There'll be little angles that aren't perfectly even. If you make it look too even, it just kind of looks like bricks or something. And we're just trying to get him bulked out here. There's really no pose to speak of. I would call this a neutral pose.
Right. And Jared's going to raise that left arm a little bit onto an axe. But I think the right hand stays hanging almost where it is. Here he is going on the chest. You know, understanding how these muscles work in the body is just really important. I mean, we can't overstate that. You know, get your anatomy books, study it, muscle magazines, and understand how these muscles interact with each other underneath the skin. You know, it's crucial.
Reference.
Right. Because these things with anatomy, male and female, as well as even creature anatomy, it's instantly recognizable to us, to all of us. It's people. When you see it and it's right, it's like, yep, there it is. And if it's wrong, it sticks out, you know, just like a sore thumb. You can see it from 50 feet away, even on a 10-inch sculpt. Oh, that's wrong. You know, it's almost something that if you do well, people don't even notice. Because so it just, the eyes just blur over it. It looks all right. It all looks, you know, right. And it's something that's it's just important to have a pretty good understanding of anatomy and we studied a lot, or we tried to.
Yeah, I mean, like I wrote some stuff down in preparation for this, and when I went back over it and looked at it, the main word I kept writing down was reference. We'll get some bodybuilder magazines, and whatever the pose the character is going to be in, we'll try to find people in that pose. And so we'll cut up a whole magazine or two and tape it on a big piece of cardboard and have it right in front of us as we're working. So we look right up at it, we look down at the sculpture. And that helps you to not make up stuff.
That's so right. I mean, if you make it up, sometimes it will scream out, to people. What are you doing right here with the pliers?
Just twisting his head, giving him a little attitude. I turned it a little bit to the left, but I also cranked it a little bit down so that just to give him a little fun. It's not just looking straight on. And most of my eyes are just holes. I'm not going to go in and try to sculpt the retina and the cuticle. Is that the right word?
No, that's not the right word.
The retina and the iris and all that. I just want to poke just a hole in there and then put a lid and a brow over it. And hopefully that will convey how angry he is, because barbarians are pissed.
They are. They've had a hard day.
Here comes the axe. Now, this is going to give him his first weapon, but it's also going to give him a little bit of support. And the third thing it's doing is it's giving a little bit of a foreground. So we want to put some stuff in the foreground, and in a little bit he'll have a little cape and maybe a sword back there, and that creates some stuff in the background a little bit so that the sculpture feels more 3D and it feels deeper from front to back.
Yeah, Jared loves his axes. A barbarian needs an axe, and if he has one axe, Jared thinks he's better with two axes.
Well, you would. I mean, the first axe you're probably just going to throw.
Exactly. Well, in a day full of pillaging, I mean, you might find a need for half a dozen axes.
You might have like a squire just carrying axes behind you. Yeah, if you were lucky. Now, again, it's good to have the gloves on when you go to mix the Bondo, because you don't want that stuff curing in your pores. Once you get it mixed up, it's okay to touch it a little bit here and there, sculpt it a little bit, but to do the mixing, you want to have a latex glove. Hey, when I'm at home, I'll just grab a Ziploc bag and stick my hand in the Ziploc bag and then roll the stuff up, because it's so much easier than putting on a latex glove, at least for me. And when we're building up the armature, I like to put a fair amount of Bondo in there so that what I hate is when the piece wiggles around. If I go to touch it and it's moving on me, I don't really like that. I like it to be very secure and firm to the touch so that I can do exactly what I want.
Watch how long it takes Jared to do anything at all to the legs. Some parts are important to us. Some parts not so much. And I tell people sometimes the legs are just all Jared cares about is the upper body, the arms, the chest, and the abdomen. And the legs are really just a base for him, for his sculpture. The legs are just a base that his sculpture, the upper body, sits on. So so they'll look like stick figures for a long while here.
I definitely, I think everybody does. We have the things we really focus on, the triceps, the eyes, the mouth, the hands, and then the things we just tend to not focus on that much, the arch of the foot, the back of the knee. A lot of the stuff, hey, if we can cover it up, we will. Not unlike a cake decorator. If you have a big smudge or a fingerprint in a cake, that's where you put the flour. So you want to decorate to hide the flaws or hide the things that you don't want to work on. And
this guy's upper body is starting to take shape.
He's been lifting.
Yeah. He may be on the juice.
He needs some ears, though. It's good to have a skull on stuff because it just, hey, it's death.
Yeah, we know you like skulls.
He's not there to serve you popcorn.
Right here, you're adding a little, like a gauntlet to the forearms, like a little.
I think this is when you took over for a second because you added the gauntlets.
Oh.
You can see your little skull bracelet that you have on.
I'm not sure.
See, and I never hold clay on my fingers like that.
Seriously?
No, you had the clay on your left finger. Yeah, I do, but I remember that I think you kind of took over the skull and
I'm fixing stuff you screwed up.
As is usually the case.
I mean, that's the story of our careers.
This helmet could have gone a little bit higher.
And the thing with the dark clay, Jared and I we replaced this clay with the same color clay later on.
We were having clay issues.
Whether we had enough clay, et cetera, et cetera. So we were bulking it out with a darker color at one point. But that's all it is a darker color. We were afraid we were going to run out, but we didn't. We were hooked up, and so we replace it as this scope goes on. We replace it with the same color medium.
You made the armature a scale too big, didn't you?
One of us did. That's for sure.
Yeah, I think we get in here and sculpt these boots a couple of times, and that happens. You know, I mean, that's the real process.
Sculpting stuff more than once.
Absolutely.
Oh my goodness, that really is. I mean, it'll be like this. Well, this is my first pass at this arm. You may sculpt it 3 or 4 more times. That's the process. That's our process.
Oh, I can think of situations where whole bodies where we've had to resculpt the whole thing a couple of times.
Now you're working on this left hand here. The fingers are so important, and a great comic book artist once told me, the thing about hands is you have them on your body as reference right in front of you, so you can always use your hands. Look at what hands do. Make the fist. The key to hands are the knuckles, really. When you realize how they lay, do or don't lay, whether the hand is open, whether it's a fist.
And we work so, what's the word I'm looking for?
Haphazardly?
Yes. Exactly. Where 1 minute we're working on the hand, and I kind of realized this as we were filming. I was like, man, if we could just work on one thing and finish it and then work on the next thing, that would probably be better for filming. But it's just however our brains are wired, we just kind of go around and poke at different stuff. I hope that left hand starts looking better quick. I think we bring up that index finger. I like to bring up the index finger and usually bring up the pinky, kind of have the pinky out like he's kind of classy or something.
like he's picking up a cup of tea.
Exactly. Well, it's just fun. It just gives the eye something to look at. If you just did all 4 fingers kind of symmetrically, it's not that great. You might not even look at it. But when you lift the index finger up Give the pinky a little lift. Just something for the eye to look at. And the skull is just something to, again, it's just something to 3D out, literally 3D. The front of the piece out, so something's coming out towards you. Working on the serratus a little bit.
And that's the muscles above the rib cage.
Right. It'll connect the lat to the ribs. And a lot of those muscles in there, from the serratus through the pec, through the shoulder, the traps at the top, it all goes in this kind of spiral type circle. That is, it's just the way the muscles connect together. And once you get a sense of that, it's so much easier to do upper bodies because your mind just kind of goes into that pattern that underlays all the skin.
Again, you can see with a lot of this, we're putting on very small pieces. Again, a lot of the kids I see, that's one of the things I think they're just putting on. The pieces they're using are just too big. We're putting on small piece after small piece. It's adding up.
Right, the bicep, there might be 5 pieces on top of each other. There might be 25 pieces on top of each other. I'm just trying to make it look cool. And, it's just going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And you got to find at some point something that it's like, okay, I'm not going to get any bigger than this. Say a point on the elbow. I'm not going to make it any wider than this. Because you can't make everything big. If everything is real big, then nothing's big. He's got to have small wrists to make his forearms look huge. And he's got to have a moderate-sized elbow to make his triceps look huge. So if you leave some things smaller, other things look way bigger. And, a good little rule is always say, no matter how big the bicep and tricep is, the shoulder is always wider. Now, of course, there's exceptions to everything if you're making a monster or some guys are different than others. But in general, the arm is going to make a long triangle downwards. It's going to start at the top and then go to a point at the bottom. I'm not really sure what kind of horns these are. Again, that's a great thing for reference. If you find some horns, and often I'll go to Google Images and look for a set of horns I like and print them out. Antelopes, ox. They have a lot of great textures, and they also have a lot of real subtle action lines in them that can add some good texture and action, even though he's not moving.